So, welcome along to another Pixiecast, and I'm back in the United States of America this afternoon. It's still relatively early morning for my guest, who is, of course, you'll see, Jen Bernosky. Hi, Jen. How are you?
Hi, Andrew. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Apart from my
Okay.
team losing at soccer this afternoon, but you
I'm
know
so sorry to hear that.
that's okay. But apart from that, I'm very well, thank you. So, tell us where you are.
I am in Missoula, Montana,
Okay,
and
Missoula.
yep, Missoula.
Okay, and what size place is Missoula?
There's about 75,000 people in Missoula city limits. So it's by Montana standards, it's a city, but by any other standard, it's just a little mountain town.
Okay. So what's the sort of nearest place that anyone outside the States would have heard of?
Um, Probably Spokane, Washington.
Oh yeah.
There's University of Montana is in Missoula, and then
Yeah.
Montana State University is in Bozeman. So those
Okay.
are the two state colleges that people may have heard of.
I'm a big fan of Frasier, so Spokane was often spoken about on Frasier. So
Yep, yeah, and so we've got a pretty good music scene here locally, or did until COVID hit. But
uh-huh.
before that, if you wanted to see any really big acts, probably up until about 5 or 8 years ago, you'd have to go to Spokane or Seattle to
Okay.
see any large act.
So how far is Seattle from you then?
Seattle is about 7 hours away. I think it's like
Oh wow.
475 miles. So,
Okay.
but Montana's such a huge state that,
Mm.
and as you know, Americans drive a lot anyway. So it's not uncommon for me to drive 2.5 or 3 hours just for a day to
Sure.
meet with a customer and then drive back that night. So
Right.
yeah, we're used to driving.
So you're talking about your customers. What do you do for a living?
I am a community relations manager for the local garbage company, and
Okay.
so we cover an area that's about 45 miles south of me, and then I cover an area. I'm sort of where I live is not serviced by my company, so we kind of bookend that area, and then the other part of my territory is about 250 miles north up in Kalispell, around Glacier National Forest,
Okay.
National
Uh-huh.
Park. So a lot of people around the world know where Glacier is, and
Yeah.
Yellowstone too. Yellowstone is
Okay.
not part of my
Sure.
territory, but another
Uh-huh.
big national park in the state.
Yeah. Okay. And how long have you been doing that work?
I've been with the company I'm with now for a little over a year, but I was in the garbage industry before with the company that's in the town that I live in, and so it's been about 6 years. But I've been in outside sales for about 18, so lots of customer service and outside sales.
And are you born and bred in the area?
No, actually, I moved to Montana in 1996. So I've been here, I've lived here longer than any place else, but I was actually born in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
And my family moved to Central California
Mhm.
in 1980. So my formative years were spent about 100 miles north of Los Angeles, about
Okay.
100 miles south of Hollywood.
Mhm.
So from like 10 to 26, I lived in California.
Okay. So you've moved around a little bit then throughout the
Yeah,
States,
yeah.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And I'm grateful to be in Montana, especially to raise kids,
Especially with what, sorry?
especially with raising kids.
Oh, I see.
One of the impetus for moving not only was to get to a place that was less populated, but also I didn't necessarily want to raise kids in insane LA. No offense
Okay.
to anyone. Just
So
not. It was a little bit too much. I was starting to outgrow that, constant frenetic sort of traffic and chaos.
so you have a bit more of a sort of a country life now then, would you say?
Very much so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
People still complain about the traffic, but it's ridiculous. It's nothing like. It's only because there's more cars than there are roads. It's not because there's
Sure.
8 million cars on the road.
Not like LA then.
No, 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 no. It is fun though. I do miss that kind of crazy driving. So it's fun to go to Seattle and go to big cities and drive again,
Uh-huh.
like you do in a big city.
Yeah, absolutely. We even hear about the traffic in LA over here in the UK as well. So it
Yeah,
must be pretty
yeah.
bad.
It is. It's really crazy. And you can be driving at 2:30 or 3 in the morning and it's still packed. It's like, where are all these people going? Does no one sleep?
I think that's what Kimball was saying about LA is that everyone's just either in their car or in their home. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's what
it
they
really
seem to
is.
do.
It's a bizarre place that way. It is.
Yeah. So let's talk about Pixies then. When did it
Yes.
all start with you and the band?
It took longer than it should have. As some of the friends that we've made over the years know, I'm a little judgmental about music, And
So
it
am I,
takes a
don't
bit,
worry. You're in good
yeah,
company.
it takes a bit for me it almost has to sneak in, like, oh wait, that's an awesome song. Who is that? That's what happened with Idols most recently.
Okay.
But yeah, Pixies in high school, I was sort of I was into harder music, and I think that started from, not to go too far back, but literally, I remember a story my mom telling me that my mom and dad went and saw Led Zeppelin in 1970, and she was 6 months pregnant with me, and
Uh-huh.
so I always blame my father for my inclination to want to see live music, because I'm like, well, what do you
Okay.
expect? You took me to a Led Zeppelin show before I was even born.
That's a pretty good
So
start, though.
it is, yeah. And I was a little bit different. I unlike the little girls who were dressing in pink and frilly dresses, I had my vampire cape on and was spinning around in the living room to Black Sabbath and
Okay.
things like that when I was like 5 and 6 years old. So I was raised on kind of heavy music,
Yeah.
Cream and Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix. So
Uh-huh.
it was weird when I got into high school and music started to become such a huge focus for everybody, at least my friend group. And all of my friends were just discovering Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and Cream. And I'm like, well, that's my dad's music. Like,
Yeah.
I need to find something that's my music. So while they thought that was cool, and while my parents were always the cool parents who would let us, play the music loud in the car, I was always kind of searching for something that was more my own. So I really, and of course, I'll be 50 at the end of this year. So I was 10 when MTV came out, and so I
Hmm.
was really into music at that time, and the kind of flood of especially new wave that was coming over by virtue of videos, of music videos.
Hmm.
So by the time I hit high school, I was really into, like, early on, some punk and Metallica and stuff like that, like freshman and sophomore year. But then started, that was kind of not my necessarily my scene, and really liked kind of the punk movement and Bad Brains and things like that. And so
Okay.
by the time I had graduated high school, or right about that time, 120 Minutes was really big on MTV. So I watched that whatever night that was, Friday or Saturday night. And so I got an exposure to a lot more music that way. But unfortunately, the video that I saw for the Pixies was Here Comes Your Man.
Right.
And seemed to me like it was way too pop. It was like REM. It was like the college rock stuff. So
Right.
like REM and U2. And while that I thought that music was fine, it just wasn't hard enough for me. So
Okay.
I had immediately written the Pixies off as they're just one of those college bands that's like the B-52s and U2 and REM, and they're just not my scene. So I started getting really into like the sub pop stuff. So we had a friend who worked in the industry, and he worked at Interscope up in San Francisco, and had heard of Sub Pop and these new bands were being released. And so we got Bleach, like I ordered Bleach from Sub Pop, and it was like 19, I guess, 89, 88, 89.
Hmm.
And was super into Mudhoney, and
I was
being
going to
so
say
close
Mud
to
Honey.
Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mudhoney and
Yeah.
Tad and
Yeah.
River and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So it was exactly like what I wanted to hear, was kind of that punk and heavy guitar driven music. And so being so close to LA, we were so incredibly fortunate to have access to just hundreds and hundreds of shows every single week, of bands that are now like legendary. I was seeing Soundgarden when nobody knew who they were, and they were opening for Voivod in this tiny little club in Reseda, and seeing Primus, before anybody knew who they were, and they were like an opening band, and Stone Temple Pilots, and all these bands that Hole and I saw Hole open up for Smashing Pumpkins at the Whiskey with
Right.
like 500 other people. So
Yeah.
I was so incredibly fortunate, much the way Jeff was in Boston at the
Yeah.
time. I
Hmm.
was just exactly where I needed to be, for that time in music. So a big, huge Hollywood band was Jane's Addiction. They played in
Hmm.
Hollywood all the time. They kind of, not only were they kind of punk and artistic and funky, but also, they just embodied everything that Hollywood was, that I loved about going down there and spending time and kind of being a freak, but feeling like I had a place to fit in. Because the town that I grew up in was, it's Bakersfield, California, which for those of you who know where that is, it's really rural and conservative, and it's the birthplace of country music in California.
Okay.
So
Right. Okay.
lots of really, like, if you had green hair, like, the rednecks wanted to kick your ass. It was just, not a good scene for the punk kids who kind of wanted to, get crazy and listen to music. We were kind of harassed for that. So Hollywood was perfect because you could look different, you could go to shows, and you weren't judged for, just being different. So, so yeah, when I saw the Pixies, I had immediately written them off, and then Nirvana. I was really into Nirvana and Mudhoney and all of that, and it wasn't until my roommate Keith, who incidentally Keith and Lisa were the couple that I moved to Montana with, so they were really close friends, and he was really into like Dinosaur Jr. and Pixies, and that was just kind of a genre of music that I'd kind of written off. And I still don't like Dinosaur Jr. I'm sorry, but I just don't like the way he sings. And again, it's one of those things that, like, if I were at a party and you play like the best Dinosaur Jr. song, I would probably love it, but I just can't sit down and make myself kind of like something or try to like something like that.
Okay.
So
it's Freak Scene, by the way, the best Dinosaur Jr. track. So.
Oh, okay. I'll make
just in case there was any debate about it.
Well, and the thing about Dinosaur Jr. is it Feel the Pain? Is that the song that they have that had a video and that was in full rotation all the time?
Possibly. I'm not that big a Dinosaur Jr. fan myself. But
I think it was like I heard one song and I was like, no, that song sucks. And then everything else, might as well be the same song. So, so in any case, I was really into Jane's Addiction. We were seeing them all the time. And there was like a culmination. I didn't look up the timeline, but there was kind of this culmination of events where there was lots of really great music. I loved all of it. And yet, there wasn't a lot of new stuff coming out that I really liked. And then my friend Keith bought Trompe l'Oeil and brought it home and put it on. And it was one of those things, I was like in the kitchen doing dishes. And he said, hey, I got this new Pixies album. I'm like, whatever, just go ahead and play it. And it was from the moment those chords were struck, I was like, holy shit, what is this? This is that pop band, the college rock band. And he's like, yeah, Jen, I've been trying to tell you that they kick ass, but you haven't been willing to listen. And I was absolutely, it was like, that was everything that I was looking for in music. And while I still love Jane's Addiction, they were starting to kind of go in a direction I wasn't a huge fan of. Although Ritual's a great album, I don't think it was as raw and great as Nothing Shocking. And then around that time, like Jane's Addiction announced they were breaking up, things were kind of falling apart in music, for me at least, with the bands that I really loved. And so Pixies became that sort of touchstone of like, that's everything I want in music. And I actually did see them before they broke up, but it was before Trump. So I saw them open in '89, the year we graduated high school. I saw them open up for The Cure with Love and Rockets. But, we were in Dodger Stadium and they were all like this size. So I was getting pop and going to the bathroom while they were playing. So I count that in my list of having seen them, but I wasn't watching. And then in '91, they opened for Jane's Addiction and Primus 3 nights in a row. And because it was Jane's Addiction, I, went to all of those shows. But again, it was like I watched them and it didn't click because, I hadn't heard Trump yet. So, so really it was Trump that made me a fan for life. And then of course they announced they were breaking up and Cobain killed himself and that whole, mid '90s crap just really, it kind of coincided with me deciding to move out of California. And so I kind of felt like my music had died. Like that was the point at which, and then Pixies broke up and I'm like, okay, that's it. That's, my uncle always told me there will be a time at which you stop liking new music. And at the time I was like, oh, you're nuts. There's no way I'll stop liking new music. I'll always want to find the newest, best stuff. And that was about the time that music kind of died for me. So it coincided with me moving to Montana, which was interesting. And my life kind of took a different direction and I didn't have access to live shows like I had before, but there was kind of a dry spell in there for a while with music for a number of reasons.
Sure. So in terms of their music then, do you prefer the stuff before the break or after the break since they come back?
I think they just kind of represent a different phase in my life. I love it for a different reason. I still love the really hard, raw sound of the early stuff. And I love every one of the songs for a different reason. But I like the new stuff too. And I just feel like it's kind of a more mature sound and a different sound. And I don't know that I would have been open to the change of sound had they gone just right from Trump into something, completely different. Like certainly Beneath the Eerie wouldn't have I don't think resonated with me
No.
back then as a younger person, like it does now. But I just think it's so cool how the band has matured both musically and obviously chronologically with us. And so it just sort of, it fits the soundtrack for whatever phase in my life that I'm in.
So have you got a favorite album then that they've done?
Um, I'd have to say Trump is my favorite just because that was the light bulb moment for me. Was, that was the moment I realized that they were everything music should and could always be for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I love bossa nova. I mean, I think, like everybody says, it kind of depends on what mood you're in and how you're feeling and what you want to hear. But really routinely now, with the advent of this fancy phone and shuffling music, it's just fun to put everything into one folder and just kind of hit shuffle. And the only downside being that if I've got it cranked up too loud for the older stuff, the mixes on the new stuff make it so loud. I've got to be careful. I can't go from Gouge Away to like Chugga without blowing out my speakers.
So have you got a favorite track then? Just one favorite track?
Yeah, favorite track would have to be Gouge Away. Although
Okay.
I have to put a qualifier on that. Gouge Away is my all-time favorite Pixie song. I listened to it last night just to kind of reinforce why it's my favorite. And I think it's the perfect Pixie song. The way that they compose a song, it's sexy, and the bass line and everything about it is just the lyrics. You've got him screaming. It's just, I think for me, it touches on every single thing that makes them amazing. And then her vocals throughout, and it's just a fucking beautiful song.
Yeah.
And especially now that they play it with the extended intro, where it sort of, kind of kind of sneaks up on you, and that anticipation of that first break and that first when he starts to sing is just so great. But I have to say though, rock music is my favorite live song. Just I can't. I remember being in Reno and looking over at Kimball the minute the red lights came on, and I knew that it was going to be rock music. I looked at Kimball. I'm like, oh my god, because I think that's his favorite too.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's nothing like rock music live. So, but Gouge is overall my favorite.
So it takes the lead as well. It was tied 2 votes each up until now with Gigantic, but now
Nice.
takes the lead again, Gouge Away. So
Yay.
clearly a popular track as I'm going through these interviews. So
Yeah.
okay, so you just got into the band, as you say. Kurt Cobain had recently died, and as you sort of alluded to, you felt like music was dying for you as well.
Yeah.
And then Charles goes out on his own and does his own thing. Did you follow his solo career?
I didn't. I really kind of felt hurt and just kind of disenchanted with music altogether. I was still listening to things like Beastie Boys and things like that, as they came out with new stuff, and exploring some new music like Sneaker Pimps and things like that. There was a college radio station in '96 when I first moved to Montana, and it was brand new. It was the first year, and I was delivery driver for Kinko's, which is a local like copy shop. So I would go out and pick up orders for customers, and we would run their projects, and I would deliver them out. So I was in the van all day long listening to this college music station. So I got exposed to a few new things that was okay, but nothing really resonated with me. I did go in an effort to try to find some Pixies albums just to replace CDs that I had lost to a local record store, and I found Frank Black's first album, the one with the starburst on the front.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I loved it. I played it all the time. It was, it's great from start to finish. But I didn't like the Catholics because it was way too country for me. My friend Keith, who introduced me to Trump, was really into the Catholics, but he's like, Jen, I think this is a little bit too country and Western for you. And at the time it certainly was. It still kind of is sometimes, but I can appreciate it on a different level, because I recognize his genius as a songwriter and as a composer of music. So even if it's a track that I don't necessarily love, it's still, I can appreciate it for a different reason.
Sure.
So I got that first album and I played it all the time and I loved it. And I got the Breeders album, but I just wasn't a huge fan of the Breeders. So while I liked that Last Splash,
Mhm.
I wasn't, nothing about those two made me seek out more from either
Okay.
act as they continued. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, it was just kind of like Kristen had, you know, I got married in 99 and my husband had a daughter already who was 5. So I kind of became instant mom,
Yeah.
and then we started having kids. So from like 99 to probably, well, when they reunited in 2004, I was looping back through my Luscious Jackson and Pixies and Beastie Boys and you know, that kind of stuff, but I wasn't really finding any new music or really exploring anything outside of that.
So just the one Frank Black solo career album then in your
Yep.
catalogue. Have you got a
Yeah.
favorite track from that album?
Well, I actually started to go back. So Kate Hester, when I first joined the group, posted about Teenager of the Year, that you haven't lived unless you've heard Teenager of the Year.
Yeah,
So
that's fair
yes,
enough.
absolutely. And so based on her recommendation, and of course her connection with the band, I was like, well, shit, I got to run out and get that. So got that, 3 or 4 years ago. Whenever, you know, whenever, I don't know, I've lost track of time. I think I joined the group in like 2017. Um, and love that. And again, was like, Jesus, why didn't I pick this up? You know, it's just so stupid that all these years that I had missed out on that. So probably Frank Black's song, although my two favorites go back to that first album. It's Parry the Wind, High Low, and Places Named After Numbers. I love
Okay.
both of those songs too much,
Hmm.
so much. So
Yeah.
I think I'd probably have to pick Parry the Wind just
Okay.
because it's a little harder. But Places Named After Numbers is just such a beautiful song.
Sure. Okay.
I started to mellow out just a little bit by the time I'd gotten married. It was like, okay, you don't need to be so punk rock all the time.
Well, they're two good choices, and that is a great album as well.
Yeah,
Both those first two albums, I think, are brilliant as his solo career albums. So
yeah.
there's so many
Well,
great tracks on both of them.
and that, you know, Parry the Wind again is another example of how, you know, the song starts out one way, and by the end of it, if you came in at the beginning, at the end, you would assume that they were two totally different songs.
Yeah.
And I just love that evolution of his songs in that way,
Uh-huh.
where you never know what direction it's going to go.
No, indeed. So how many times have you seen Pixies over the years then?
Well, if I count the first 4 times, which I was an idiot and didn't appreciate what I was seeing, there's 20 total.
20.
So
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I actually had to go back through and based on Adele's love of spreadsheets, I made myself a little spreadsheet so I could just copy and insert as I remembered shows. My friends Lisa and Keith, who again were the ones, Keith was the one who bought Trump, and they were the ones who moved to Montana with me. When they announced that they were reuniting, they had moved from Montana to Atlanta. And Lisa called me on the phone. My youngest son was like 6 months old, 7 months old. And so I was in full mom mode. And she called me and said, Jen, we just heard the Pixies are getting back together. We're buying you a ticket to the show. We're buying you a ticket to Atlanta. You're flying out here and you're going to go see the show with us.
Wow.
So I
Good
never would have
friends.
been. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. They were. Keith had frequent flyer miles because he worked
Okay.
he was a computer programmer, and so yeah, they flew me to Atlanta, and so I had this great like kind of, you know, I left the kids behind. Thankfully, I wasn't breastfeeding my son anymore, so I was
Okay.
like, here you go. Here's bottles
Yeah.
of formula, and left my husband with 3 tiny boys and an 8-year-old daughter. And bless his heart, he was super supportive.
Yeah.
And so we saw him in Atlanta when they reunited, and then and that kind of just I lost my mind at that show. It was just so much fun, and so
So that's the other side of the country as well, isn't it?
yeah, it's
But
completely
Atlanta,
on the other side
Georgia.
of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
And so that was great, and just it kind of reignited that love for them, and again, sort of the depression too. Like, God damn it, this is, you know, they're never going to record new music. This is may never happen again. And so it was great, and it was important and wonderful, but still kind of sad when it was over.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started to, as the boys got older, and as I kind of started to, you know, be a little bit more selfish about doing things for myself. I had a friend who I worked with who had started seeing the shows. They were doing those shows where you could buy the CD right afterward. And I worked with her, and then I had quit that job, and then I went back because my husband still worked there, and she was wearing a Pixies hoodie. And I was like, Susie, what the fuck? Like, oh my God, you like the Pixies? And she's like, oh, Jesus, yeah, how can you not? But she had come to the Pixies from the Breeders, and she's about 10 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately had a friend now that knew who the Pixies were while she came to it differently.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, here's this CD. Let me burn you this CD from this show that I saw. And so then she became my concert buddy. So in '09, when they did the Doolittle anniversary tour, she and I drove to Seattle to see them together, which was great because I don't think I would have done that had it not been for another Pixies buddy that I could go see shows with. And then we went to, when Indy Cindy was released, again, I kind of dropped out from '09 to 2014. My husband and dad were diagnosed with cancer at the end of 2012, and life got kind of rough. Well, kind of still is, but got kind of rough at the time. So when Indy Cindy came out, I wasn't really looking for anything, but again, that hit right at a time in my life when I needed something like that. So I kind of, we'd gotten to a point of equilibrium where we could kind of anticipate what was going to happen with my husband's health, and my dad had passed away already. And so when Indy Cindy came out, I tried a couple times putting it in and playing it, and it didn't really resonate with me. But then one day I was having a bad day at work and just put it in, and all of a sudden it just was like, hey, that's my band. They're speaking to me again. And so for that tour, I went to Seattle to see them. And then my brother and I went to Spokane. So it was the first time he had an opportunity to see them. And they blew his mind. I said, Mike, he's 7 years younger than me. So he's a skateboarder and really into punk rock and heavily influenced by my having a big sister that was into cool music. So he was like, oh, fuck yeah, let's go see the Pixies. And he just was blown away, as everybody is that, has any taste in music.
So keeping it in the family then.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was fun. And then I guess I didn't see him again until the Las Vegas happening. Then that was, 2017, I joined the group, and it was so fun to find people who were into them. And I quickly realized that the group wasn't a bunch of, this one's better. It wasn't arguing and stupid back and forth about stuff. It was just a real mutual love for the band, and not about one-upsmanship and who's a bigger fan and who's seen them more and all that kind of stuff. So
unless you get onto the Kim Deal Paz question.
Exactly. Which I think is just absolutely ridiculous, because I don't know. Would you rather have a band never make music again because they can't keep the original lineup? And Paz has added so much musicianship, and she's just amazing. So
there wouldn't be Paz if there hadn't been Kim, would there? So
exactly. And so many other female bass players that influenced, just having a woman up on stage playing with the guys. As I was slamming around in the mosh pit and my freshman sophomore year in high school, and getting beat up for being the only girl that's in the pit, it's like, fuck yeah, see, we can rock out. L7 and Hole, we're not all
And a lot of those songs just wouldn't be the same if it was a male singer.
Not at all. No. And I think that was what was added to the different sound that they had. It was that kind of ethereal female voice with his, with his insane range of being able to scream, and also, those high-pitched sounds he makes and everything. It's just amazing.
Yeah. So you touched upon happenings. You've been to a few. Mm-hmm. And you've managed to see the band all over the States. So tell me about your happening experiences.
Yeah, so the Las Vegas one was awesome. I had immediately, my first thought was, oh, well, I got to do this. But then, the logistics start to come into play, and it's like, this is ridiculous. It's way too much money. But actually, coincidentally, my friend Susie, who was the one who had kind of, we bonded with and over the band, and went and saw the Doolittle Seattle show. I asked her to lunch, and I said, hey, how would you like to go to Las Vegas to meet all these people that I met online and go see a show? And she's like, fuck yeah, that's awesome. And there's really cheap flights.
She didn't think it was weird.
Oh, not at all. No,
okay.
No. Susie's down for anything. But I did, there was kind of, and we're all around the same age. So there was that kind of like, what are we doing? These people could be lunatics, and I'm flying to meet them. But again, I think, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's okay. Pixie White flew across from the UK for it. So
well, that was part of it.
Having never flown before or gone out of the country. So.
I know, that's so insane. That's so brave and so amazing. but yeah, it was, and I think that was part of it, was like, I know we all feel this way. So the likelihood of every one of these people being a lunatic is so outlandishly small that, you know, even if you find a couple of people who you're like, oh, they're kind of weird, you know, we can just break off. But I'm, unfortunately, you know, I was a little bit nervous about that. I'm an extrovert, but I'm also, I forget who, I think it was Adele who was saying that, you know, she's an extroverted introvert. There's still a lot of anxiety with me about meeting people. You know, if it's a client, I have no problem about walking into somebody's office or doing a presentation about recycling in front of 50 people. I no problem with that. But the idea of like meeting people who I want to like, and I want them to like me, it's just this neurotic, you know, crazy stuff that happens. So, and I was there with Susie too, so it was weird. I didn't want to completely break off and leave her on her own, even though she would have been totally fine. So I didn't hang out with everybody as much as I would have liked to, because I was more trying to kind of, I'm on sort of a mini vacation with her, but then also, you know, wanting to spend time with people. So this show was amazing. In fact, I know Greg mentioned the bouncing floor, which was both cool and a little disconcerting, because I kept thinking, am I going to be lying in a pile of bodies in the basement of this venue, like dying? And then I was like, I just resigned myself to it. Like, okay, if this is the way I die, then I'm okay with that. If it's bouncing up, if it's bouncing up and down to rock music with a bunch of people that I just met who love them as much as I do, then I'll take it. You know,
those sprung floors, you know, the first time, it's quite a weird experience.
Yeah. And I just kept repeating, I kept thinking in my head, this is a brand new place. Like, there's no way in Las Vegas they're going to build something that's going to collapse under, you know. I would have been more afraid if it would have been some dive bar in the middle of nowhere, you know, or in some seedy part of a big city that had been around for 200 years.
So Vegas was your first happening, but I know you've been to some more since.
Yeah, and so there was Vegas, and then I guess I went to, you know, every one of them has been a little mini happening, if not a big one.
I saw a photo of you looking very cold in Boston.
Looking for a what?
Looking very cold in Boston.
Yeah. So the Boston was definitely a happening. I'm trying to think of the one that was right after. So after Las Vegas, I took my son, Malcolm, to Seattle to see them. So that was a trip, just the two of us, which was really fun. He was 13. He met Miles, and we met Shane there as well. And we were up at the rail, and I looked over, and Shane looked familiar, and I said, "Are you in the Pixies group?" And he said, "Yeah, I am." I was like, "Oh my God." And so that was super fun that we just coincidentally, it was me, Malcolm, and then Shane. So that was fun. A little tiny mini happening with Shane. And then after that one was Brooklyn. So that really was a happening, because that was the Brooklyn Steel Show, and we all met at the bar beforehand. And that was just great. It was so amazing to meet Kate and Sean. And again, didn't get to spend as much time with everybody as I would have liked, but we got to hang out and have pizza. And I met Kristen, and Jesus, that was so fun. And then the show was amazing. We were kind of all spread out at that show. We were, you know, kind of in chunks. But it was so emotional to know that I was seeing Kate's art on the screen with Kate at the same time she was seeing it for the first time. And so it was super emotional. I mean, I cry all the time. So of course I was in tears, because it was my first time to New York. It was my first time. I came with my friend Amy, so I wasn't traveling by myself, but it was another kind of big deal, you know, that I was sort of breaking away and doing what I wanted to do. It wasn't a family vacation or anything like that. So yeah, that was super emotional and just amazing. And then we hung out at the bar until like 3 a.m. We had to leave the next morning at like 7:30. And so Amy and I didn't even sleep. We left the bar, went back to our hotel, packed up all our stuff, and went right to the airport, because there was no way I could. So that was the night that I didn't sleep, coming back from Brooklyn. And then that summer I did 3 in a row with Malcolm, my youngest son. They coincidentally, and not to say that I'm the cause of this, but in Seattle, Miles came down off the stage and talked to Malcolm and I, like right on the other side of the rail, which I was blown away by. I mean, so incredibly gracious with his time. And
he's a lovely guy. I've met him over here as well. So
and he comes down and says hi and waves from the stage. I mean, I'm just so incredibly grateful for him and his willingness to kind of tolerate our silliness. But but he came down and was talking to us, and he said, remind me again of where you're from. And I said, we're in Missoula, Montana. And he said, oh yeah, well, I've been to Yellowstone. We'll have to get back around that way again. You know, we've never played there. And I said, yeah, I know, it would be great. So then the next summer they announced that they were playing a show in Bonner, which is just right outside of Missoula. They built a new amphitheater. And so not to say I'm the reason that Missoula, or the Pixies came to Missoula, but I definitely did mention it to Miles. And so that was that was another 3 in a row for me, because I bought the tickets to Bonner, and that was an amazing show because I have so many friends in Missoula, having lived here for over 25 years. And it was so exciting to be able to see the Pixies in my hometown with all of my friends. And my sons, I had my oldest son and my youngest son there with me. And God, talk about emotional. I was crying almost the whole damn time. Look over at my sons seeing the Pixies with me in Missoula was just too much. It was mind blowing. And then after I bought the tickets for that, they announced a Weezer. That was the Weezer tour.
Okay.
They headlined in Missoula, thank goodness. And then they had an Auburn, Washington show, which is about an 8-hour drive. No, I'm sorry. It's about 6.5, 7-hour drive from us.
Yeah.
So just a little bit east of Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
So we were driving in the car, and I said to my sons, I was like, you know, if I was really crazy, Mom, I would buy tickets to Auburn and then Bend, Oregon, which was down another, 5-hour drive down below that show. And that was another headliner. So it would have been bookend headliner shows with a Weezer show in between. And my youngest son, bless his heart, he's like, well, Mom, if you want somebody to go with you, I'll go with you to those shows. I was like, oh shit, it's on. so I immediately got online and bought us both tickets. So it was great. We saw them 3 nights in a row. It was an insane road trip where we saw them in Missoula. We lived actually 30 miles south at the time. So we drove home that night, got up early the next morning, drove all the way, like a 7.5-hour drive to Auburn, Washington, saw them with Weezer that night, and then got up the next morning and then drove another 5.5 hours down to Bend, Oregon, and saw them that night. And God bless his heart, the kid was such a trooper. He was pretty beat. I was completely running on adrenaline. So I was excited, and my poor knees and my poor old body was shot, but I was like, we are going to do this.
You should have got a spot on the tour bus.
I know. Yeah, I thought about that. I was like, God, they're so lucky they get to sleep, whereas I have to go home, just try to crash and get as much sleep as possible, and then drive all that time. But yeah, my God, so much fun. He and I just had a great, mom and son trip, and it was so wonderful to see them, and the shows were great. And the Weezer show wasn't so much, it was different vibe for sure. But and yeah, it was so much fun. So that was a great experience for he and I, just as a mom and son, but also to be able to see him three nights in a row.
Yeah, wow.
I think of a full 1,500 miles round trip when all was said and done. So yeah, it was a long trip.
So when you go and see them, you do it properly then?
I do. Yeah, it's like if I'm gonna invest the money in this, I'm gonna do it up. And so that was the first year that I did 3 in a row. And then the next year we did, that was in December, did the New York, New Haven, and Boston. And so after 2 years of 3 in a row, I was hoping to keep that streak going, but COVID had other plans. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just looked it up. I saw them 6 times last year.
Wow.
Early, I know, kind of.
That's
insane.
As many times as I've seen them since 1989 when I first saw them, when you first saw them.
Yeah. I'm just lucky. I mean, we're lucky that they tour a lot here, and we're so fortunate that while plane tickets aren't super cheap out of Missoula, between $400 and $700, it's if they're playing on the west side of the country, especially, they almost always stop in Spokane, and definitely in Seattle. I definitely have an opportunity to see them. So
yeah.
And then really the Brooklyn Steel Show was really what cemented for me wanting to fly to the East Coast to see them, because again, that's that idea that everything's really close together, and you can see them in New York and then drive 2.5 hours to New Haven and drive another 2.5 or 3 to Boston. Jeff was driving, so I don't remember the time frames, but when you're in the car with Pixies people, it's like 5 minutes. The commute was nothing. It was really nice.
Wow. So when COVID's all over and everything's back to some kind of normality, you're hoping to pick up on that sort of amount of gig going then, are you?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's, I'd like to say I've been saving money during this time, but I've really just been buying merch and I've started buying albums. Like I can justify buying albums now because I'm not traveling. But yeah, I really want to come over. I want to meet the gang in the UK and do, just, I would love to just take 2 weeks off and
Sure.
just whether it's around Pixie shows or not, and just, because yeah, obviously I don't mind driving.
Yeah.
Start at one end of the country and just drive up and
Distances are a lot shorter over here. So.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I like the idea of driving. I love to drive. So the idea of driving with the steering wheel on the other side of the
Yeah,
car and
yeah.
learning a different way to drive, that just really excites me. So,
Uh-huh.
so yeah, I can't wait till we can travel again and I can come see everybody in person.
It'd be great to meet you in person.
Yeah,
So
I would
you
love.
mentioned about merchandise. Are you a big t-shirt fan then?
Yeah, yeah, I am. I've got my Tame T-shirt on
Yeah.
today, and
Uh-huh.
I pretty much buy this. Started a long time ago. I remember going to my first Metallica show in like my freshman year of high school, and I bought all 5 shirts, and they were $25 at the time. This was like 1986,
Wow.
87, and they were, 25 dollars a piece. So so yeah, I always buy the t-shirts. I always buy the merch at the show, and then it invariably goes on sale online, and so I buy a backup, and so I wear it a while, and I figure out, okay, that's my favorite shirt, and that's my favorite hoodie. So when they go on sale around Christmas time, I'll get a backup. So I have a ridiculous amount. I think I've got like 8 or 10 hoodies, and some of
Wow.
them have never been worn because
Uh-huh.
I'm completely neurotic and make sure that I have a backup.
So I spoke to Kurt the other day, Kurt Carlson, and he often says he wears them when he goes out and meets clients and that as well. He feels comfortable just going out in a Pixies t-shirt and that. So
Yeah, yeah. I when I used to go out and meet clients, I was a little bit more, kind of officey dress. But in my personal life, I absolutely, like, you almost never don't see me in a Pixies shirt or a Pixies hoodie. People tease me around town like, "Oh yeah, you know Jen because she's got a Pixies hoodie on." So um, it's I represent every opportunity I can.
and your son's big fans as well. You've been saying so.
Yeah, they tolerate me and my music. We lived 35 miles. We don't anymore, but whenever the boys were going to high school, I sent them to a high school that's in Missoula, and we were about 25 miles south of Missoula, and they're on a commute with me, so it's like, guys, I'm gonna listen to the Pixies. So they've literally grown up hearing it. Their dad isn't really into hard music. He's more
Okay.
Bruce Springsteen and then also like Count Basie and Louis Armstrong and
Okay.
jazz music.
Mhm.
And so they've got a really great sort of spectrum
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
of music to be exposed to.
Not fish then.
Mom,
Everyone's been telling me about fish recently
no
in the
fish.
States.
No
No
fish.
fish.
I did have a hippie friend when I moved to Missoula who loved fish, and so
Okay.
as you were wont to do, everybody sits around and there's lots of imbibing of different substances, and I can see the appeal maybe, but I would, like I said to Kate, I responded to one of her posts. It's like, you would have to be out of your mind on LSD to be able to tolerate like a 30-minute long jam song. I just can't. You got to come on. Let's wrap this up. I need about a 2-minute long,
So if I
break.
so if I start looking into fish, that's what it's going to be like, is it?
It
Every
is,
track's
yeah.
30 minutes long.
They do have one song that I really liked. I used to call it Chapter 7, but I think it's like Chapter 0 or something. I'll have to find it. I'll post it under our
Okay.
that I actually liked. And again, that was one of those things where I was exposed to it so much when I would hang out with him that
Uh-huh.
finally I was like, okay, I can tolerate this song. What's the name of this one?
Yeah.
But no, I'm not a fish fan.
So you're saying that your son sort of tolerated it and they've sort of gone along with it, and obviously they've
Yeah.
become more and more into the music as time's gone by.
Yeah, I think my oldest son, who's almost 20 and is starting to hang out with, his adult friends, when they're all hanging around, he'll hear Pixies start to, because, all those kids are into Fight Club and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which they actually just recently saw for the first time. And they were like, okay, we get it now. At the end, they're like, we see why you love that movie.
Mhm.
Because I did at the time, of course, that was in the dark times when there was no Pixies music. And my friend Lisa from Lisa and Keith, who introduced me to Trump, they went and saw it in the theater, and they were like, Jen, you got to see this movie. We're not going to tell you anything about it, but you have to see it. And I remember when that first note that you can hear and you know that it's Where's My Mind, I grabbed my husband's hand and was like, oh my God, it's the Pixies. And I immediately started crying. So,
Wow.
so yeah, it's that I was a little emotional at the time. Yeah, so the boys tolerate it. They there are songs that they like, and I get so excited whenever they say, hey mom, you know, this actually is a Pixie song that I like. But they're like my husband. They can't deal with the discordant sort of off-key grungy sound of the guitar, and which
Right.
I love that it sounds off-key, and I love that, you know, because it's intentional. It's
Yeah, yeah,
my
yeah.
husband says it sounds like they don't know how to tune their guitars, and it's like, no, that's, you don't get it. That's not.
So
It's
so they're
completely.
not, so possibly they're not sort of so much fans of Come On Pilgrim and Surfer Rosa and that then. So
No, not at all, not at all. In fact, they're much bigger fans of the Catholics and his
okay.
solo work
Yeah.
than yeah, just because it's a little bit more melodic. And
Hmm.
like my husband said the other day, we were listening to, oh, what was it? There was a song that really sounds like Bruce Springsteen, and Ed said, you know, I can really hear Charles's influence. He wears his influences on his sleeve when he plays his solo stuff. And I
Hmm.
said, yeah, you're right. You really can tell sort of what he's hearkening to. And but you know, it was heavy saxophone and really an
Okay. Yeah.
arrangement that sounded very much Bruce Springsteen. And
Hmm.
since my husband's from New Jersey, he's a big Springsteen fan, so he
Okay.
hit me immediately, which I did
Uh-huh.
too. I was like, hey, listen to this song.
Yeah.
It's
So
Springsteen.
so talking about the Catholics, the rest of the family are fans, but you're not such a fan of the Catholics' music then.
Um, I love, there are songs that I absolutely love. As I was looking through the catalog, and really it started most recently. Like it was like 2 years ago that I downloaded, what's the one with the kind of gold cover? I can't remember. I don't know any of the
Honeycomb?
album. No, not Honeycomb. It's the one with Solid Gold and I Need Peace. It's got like
My
some,
knowledge isn't good enough, I'm afraid. So.
yeah, yeah. But James Steely recommended that to me. And my husband was in the hospital, and I was driving back and forth 2.5 hours. And he said, Jen, you've got to listen to this album. And I bought it before the drive and listened to it the whole way up. And I Need Peace came on, and I just burst into tears. It was an emotional time anyway. But it
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, how have I lived my whole life and not had this song in my life? So it's been fun to go back, and so while I don't necessarily like it from beginning to end, there's songs that, you know, I
Yeah.
appreciate for what they are, but they're not like my favorites. Every single one of his solo or the Catholics albums that I've bought and listened to, there's one or two tracks where I'm like, oh my God, my life is better because I have this song in my head now.
So have you
Um,
got a favorite Catholics track then?
I I went through this last night and again this morning, and I I'll rattle off all of my favorites because there's five. I'm going to John Cole you right now. Um, Western Star is a
You're a lot
fucking
different to John
amazing song.
Cole.
Yeah. I love that so much. That was so goddamn fun. I've Seen Your Picture is another beautiful one. Solid Gold is one of those that's just like raw and so emotional, and I love it. Everything Is New is beautiful, and California Bound. All of those songs. Again, those are ones that I can't imagine my life without those songs now, and I'm so grateful they're in them or they're in it. But I think Western Star of all of those is just the
Okay.
one that routinely, when it comes on, I'm like, God damn it, this song is amazing. Um, and and then there was another one, and I think this was Black Francis. There's a song called "In the Time of My Ruin," and maybe it was Frank Black. I don't know what album it's on,
Okay.
but
I
but
don't
it's
recognize the
one
title.
where, yeah, I was in the kitchen, and we've got Alexa where you've got just Amazon Music, so you can just say, you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
play songs by Frank Black.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
whether
yeah.
or not I own the album or not, it plays it. And I was in the kitchen. This was only like a month or two ago, and In the Time of My Ruin came on, and it starts out, and it's kind of like this poppy little song, and talking about him meeting an art curator and deciding he was going to date her. And then about three-quarters of the way, it just changes again, as his songs often do. And it's talking about the roof is falling down and the floor is falling out from under you. And again, I just burst into tears. And to this day, I can't listen to the song without feeling like I'm going to cry in the second half. And the outro is just beautiful. So, so yeah, I'm still discovering, even within the last couple months, these songs that I didn't know existed, and they sneak up on me because it's in a rotation of songs that I've known and loved for years and decades in some cases. And then one will pop up and it just kind of sneaks into my consciousness and just blows me away again. So the idea that he can still keep getting me all these years later is just a testament to his genius.
But if it came down to one, it would be Western Star, yeah?
It would be Western Star, yeah.
Which
just
is
from an
a
overall
clear
start to
favourite.
finish. Yeah, start to
Clear
finish.
favourite from other people. That's 4 times
Yeah.
now that Western Star has been nominated from the Catholics' work. So that one's written down.
Nice.
Lovely. Okay, so we got to that last question. I think you know what the question's going to be, if you're not embarrassed to answer it.
No, not at all. No, I rarely get embarrassed or offended.
Okay.
When you ask the question of the very first time, do you want to ask the question just in case people haven't seen the others, or should we just assume everybody knows?
How do you mean? Sorry, you've lost me.
Oh, did you want to ask me the question just so everybody knows what I'm answering? It's the naked one, right?
It's the naked one, yeah.
Yeah. It's just,
I sort of, because I don't know people and that, I sort of judge as I'm going along whether it's appropriate, particularly with the women, because I'm an English gentleman, you see. So
absolutely, right. You're not.
I sort of judge as I'm going along whether it's an appropriate question or not to ask.
Yeah,
so.
I could definitely make you blush with some of the things I could say. So yeah, no worries. No worries about me.
Okay.
So yeah, if I'm naked on stage and I have to sing a song, when you first asked that, the first thing that popped into my head was, I have me a vision. And so that it would have to be distance equals rate times time, because it's a damn near perfect punk rock song. And it's relatively short. And it was the first thing that popped into my head when I thought of myself standing naked on stage. So whether or not that's relevant in any way with regards to the lyrics, that's what I'm going with.
That's what you're going with.
There wasn't any television.
Jen, it's been fabulous to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon or this morning for you.
Yeah, thank you for listening to me. You didn't really get to talk much, but that's what happens.
That's what makes a good interview. So it's not about me, it's about my guests.
Well, and thank you so much for doing this and for spending the time. It's been so wonderful to talk to, or to hear everybody and feel connected on a different level. So Andrew, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it as well. I'm meeting lots of lovely people, and hopefully I'll get to meet some of them properly as well.
I can't wait. I can't wait to give you and Jordan a big hug.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. You have a good day and a good weekend, won't you? And thank you once again for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, honey.
All the best. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.